All right, everybody, welcome back. It's another Thursday podcast here. We got a big one for you today. We're going to be talking about infidelity. So it's a pretty charged topic.
Yeah, a little nervous.
Not much really gets people as fired up as talking about cheating and affairs and infidelity. But first, tell me about your life. I know you're going through a wipes crisis.
Yep. I am going through a wipes crisis and a mall going out crisis. I have officially hit stage 2 of grief, like anger.
Angry at the whole situation. You just want to go out.
I want to go out.
But not angry enough to go protest with guns and flags in hospitals. Eh?
No, not yet. But I'm thinking about it.
I was saying before we turn the mics on here, I'm settling into this pretty well.
You told me I have a better social life now than before.
I legitimately, I mean that. And people might think that's unbelievable. But here's the thing. I drink like 2-3 times a year. So I do see my friends, when we golf or when we barbecues and stuff. But a lot of time they're partying, they're going out, they're hanging out. And I'm not a part of that as much. With everybody being stuck in, like I normally do. I'm a homebody. Yeah. So people kind of come around to the way of
your life,
of my lifestyle. And so we're doing, video chat, poker tournaments twice a week. We got Jeff Joslin, the former UFC fighter, he's doing his workouts 7 p.m. daily. You got yoga going on. I got online violin lessons going on. I
think the problem is that I don't do the online thing.
Yeah, a lot of people don't.
I just don't. Yeah.
And I think it also has to do, to be honest, with me being into gaming as a kid. Maybe. So I got into online communities and I got used to online friendships and stuff like that at a younger age. So it probably just made it more
like, for example,
natural.
To do an at-home workout, why would I be sweating in my living room by myself, right? Now, if you tell me to go to the gym and go dance around with other people, then yeah, of course, I'll go do that.
Yeah.
But
for some people, it is the act of getting together and gathering with others.
I think so.
And being part of it. I know a lot of going to the mall, going to the movies. I didn't realize it till this, but that to me is social, even if I don't interact with anybody else there. Being around.
You're around people, you see people. Right?
Yeah, I definitely have been... feeling the urge to connect in person, because if I'm out on my porch, let's say,
I was excited to go get my kid vaccinated. Like, I put on makeup. He dressed up. When I saw the nurse, I was like, I'm so excited to see you. And she laughed. I'm like, this is legit. Like, I have lipstick on and I'm like ready, to interact with you.
No, I know the same thing as when people are walking by my house. They'll be like, "Oh, walking your dog, eh?" Be like, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so that's good. I'm glad we're both mentally functional and
somewhat
ready to go.
Better than others.
So let's get down to business here. All right, so what are we starting with today? Definitions, right?
Definitions. Let's define this, baby.
Because it's tough. You talk about infidelity. One of the first arguments is what I did is not infidelity. To create a definition, we have to create a definition that covers everything, which is pretty tough. And to do that, you have to be very general. So a very general definition is something along the lines of, if you are hiding or concealing something from your partner that would be hurtful to them. You can conceal things that are not hurtful. That's not infidelity.
That's okay, yeah.
So an example of that would be something like
a place you visited when you were single, maybe.
Yeah, things that don't hurt or impact them. So on the other hand, let's say that you delete text messages and you're saying, well, I don't want them to misinterpret the content, or you have some reason for deleting them. You're already like in the gray area. If you got to delete it, not a good sign.
Yeah, if either or, because maybe the content was a little suspicious, or because there's something going on between you and your partner where you can't be completely honest because you're fearful, because you're nervous about something, right?
Yeah. So this can change. I mean, we work with couples who sex isn't considered infidelity. They have rules in their relationship where you're allowed to do that. So we're not saying that any particular act itself. We're saying, again, based on your own definitions, here is something you can use.
So grabbing this definition, what couples have to do is kind of operationalize it, right? So that, like, define behaviors within your definition. So what behaviors would you do and hide from me that I would consider infidelity, right? So some couples will have issues with that. Some people think watching porn is an act of infidelity.
Some people that's a marriage deal breaker. Yeah. For other people, it's, I don't even care. So you can be anywhere on the spectrum. The tough part is everybody assumes naturally that infidelity will not be a part of their relationship. So most people don't even have this conversation.
No, it's a hard one to have.
It is. And it's not like, okay, well, just in case you cheat on me, let's talk about, that's not what we're saying. We're saying like, what are boundaries? What do your boundaries look like? Like what's okay for me? Like
it's okay for you.
Is flirting crossing the line? Is physical touching?
No, sometimes I've had couples that say if my husband or my wife is thinking of someone else in a certain way, I consider that a manifestation of cheating. Like if they're imagining themselves having sex with someone else, or if they're imagining spending their days with someone else. Okay, they're not doing anything, but they are thinking about these people that way. That for me is a breach.
Right. You're fantasizing
about someone else.
Okay, so for a couple like that, so what would we say to a couple like that? Well, if you're thinking about somebody else, talk about it. So you get lashbacks. So whenever we talk about infidelity, especially when we start talking about, thoughts or non-physical actions, some people are like, well, that's crazy. That's my internal personal world. What goes on in there can't be infidelity. So what we're talking about here is you're shifting your emotional focus from your partner to somebody else.
Exactly.
So when that happens, we're not saying, oh, you're an awful person, you've done this bad act. Not at all. We're just saying that's a flag that something might be going on. It warrants a conversation. So there are grades for sure of this where we're not saying that thinking about being with somebody is the same or as bad as going and sleeping with somebody. Obviously, that's not the case. But still.
But that's information, right? That's information that tells you something about where you are, where your relationship is, and where you could be headed, right? If you don't take precaution. So why do people do this? Why do people breach? If we've defined it and you knew exactly what I thought was a breach of our intimacy and our relationship, why did you go ahead and do this to me?
So this is the part where things get contested the most. I think
this is the hardest part, really.
Some people say, well, if you're a cheater, you're just a cheater. It's like a characterological part of who you are. Once a cheater, always a cheater. And there are some people who do cheat. There are some people who do not cheat.
The world can be divided into those two.
Yes. So there are not many times where I would call something out in a very black and white way, but this is a very naive view. This is not how people function. You cannot divide people or say certain people are capable of this and certain people are not, and that is predictable. That is false. So there's some major research in psychology that demonstrates that people placed in the right situations, educated people, wealthy people, poor people, smart people, people who are not as intelligent, like you can go, you can
whatever it is.
Any variables when you put them into situations where there's pressures and different things going on. Everybody is capable of doing bad acts, if you want to define as a very non-clinical definite doing bad shit. So when we talk about that, what do we mean? Well, we're talking about something like the Milgram experiment, which we covered in the last episode. So when it comes down to are there cheaters and not cheaters? No. There are people who are more likely to, and you could say this person has
a stronger tendency to do this, right? They have a bigger weakness.
It's not as black and white.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a great way of putting it. There are people who are more likely to, like the risk is higher.
Yeah.
But there's nobody who is yes or no.
I can promise will never do that in their lifetime.
Yeah, that's not a possible thing to do.
Yeah.
So why do people do it then? Is monogamy just not a natural thing for humans? You hear this one argued quite often using the animal kingdom. Well, there's one male and there's a bunch of females, and that's kind of the most common way things go down.
It's interesting how we say that we are separate from animals in so many different ways, but then that particular one, we're very similar, right?
Yeah, it's funny because you think of two. Okay, well, let's ask some other questions just to kind of illustrate the absurdity of this comparison. Is it natural that we fly in airplanes? Is it natural that we develop and use vaccine or keep snakes as pets?
Tiger, this phenomena of Tiger King. People have tigers in their homes. People buy wild animals.
That would be a hell of an episode.
Come on.
Covering the Tiger King and like all the people there and all the stuff that's going on. I don't know if that would even be, that would be like a series.
Yeah, I think we would do at least 2 or 3 with each person, right?
Could not do that in time.
But yeah, so we're not. We do things completely different from the animal kingdom because we have reason, right? We have freedom, reason, liberty. We're radically different.
Okay, so let's look at the argument then. The people would recognize that and say, okay, but we do those things, but maybe they aren't natural. So maybe monogamy is one of those things. Well, how do you define natural? I would argue that natural is the state that we would exist in, or the decisions we would make if there were no societal rules or expectations or anything else going on.
Government structure.
So the way that I tried to answer this question was looking into the demographics of uncontacted tribes on first contact. So there's the ethnographic atlas, where this one researcher has gone and kind of organized all the data from all the uncontacted tribes when they were contacted and research was done. They were looking at their hierarchies, how their societies were structured, and more than 80% of them were monogamous. So these are cut off from the world. There's no like Christian, you got to get married and follow God or anything like that.
Well, there's their practical
there's probably
spirituality.
Some kind of religion. Yeah, but not the religions that we know that some people blame monogamy on. Like it's just a function of Christianity or whatever it would be. So I would argue from almost any viewpoint, monogamy is the kind of default natural state for human beings to be in.
And also, if we were to look at research of what makes people happy, like the Harvard study about happiness, then after I think it was 75 years of research that Harvard University's done.
Is it that much? Wow.
Yeah, it's the longest study in the history of psychology. It's really long. And what they found was what makes human beings really happy is very simple: long-term, satisfying, honest relationships.
Yeah, that's a big one. So when we're talking about infidelity and the effect on relationships, let's save that actually.
We're doing the why. We're doing the why. So we thought, okay, so some people hear that why, because this person is awful. Okay, we kind of debunk that. Okay, there's not one act that defines us as awful people. We are much more than what we do.
Touch on that though, because that may sound like, well, that's just your opinion, guys. So Carrie gave a good example.
Yeah. So if you were to wake up in the morning, just like I'm just gonna grab today. So I wake up in the morning and I get up at 7:40 generally, and I am very patient with my son and change him. So you say, oh, patience. At 8 o'clock, school starts in my house. Okay, 8:20. My patience has decreased tremendously. I am about to my kids are in danger. So am I this patient woman that was able to change the newborn at 7:40? Am I this impatient woman who's trying to teach fractions to a sixth grader? Right. So, and this is 20 minutes of my life.
Right.
Which one am I?
Right. So this is a good illustration on how people make this fundamental attribution error where they say your behavior is a result of your character, your beliefs, who you are. No.
It defines your future.
Yes. And in this case, Carrie's example, it's the situations that she is in. So when she is fresh and woke up and doesn't have these pressures of deadlines and
fractions and math I don't understand
on her, she's okay. She behaves in a more patient way. When you exert stresses and expectations and deadlines and other things on her,
I behave very differently.
Her behavior. Right.
I behave very differently.
So this is what we're talking about when we say you cannot say there are good or bad people. That doesn't work. No. It depends on your situation. If I was in a situation of, take any person who has committed some atrocious act, put me through their same experiences, what they've gone through, their same emotional life, I would almost definitely end up doing the same things because there's not a whole lot of character element. So the concern and counter argument to that is, well, does that mean we don't have free will? No, of course not. You can exert your will, but it is not the only factor. So it's a confluence of these two things. We're not saying it's just you're at the mercy of whatever happens in your life. No, that's ridiculous.
We're not
saying
our profession wouldn't exist.
Exactly. We're not saying that you're a perfect decision maker either, who is immune to the situations around you. We're saying it's a confluence, a combination of those things that come together.
Also I think the situation, what we think about the situation, right? So, probably if I was to analyze this difference in my level of patience, this 20 minutes of my life today in the morning, probably with my newborn, I don't have thoughts like I would have with my sixth grader, right? So there's an evaluation of the person. There's an evaluation of what I should be doing, what I should be acting. There's expectations on myself that maybe another mother doesn't have, right? So there is an impact of the situation, and there's an impact of how I read the situation.
Okay, so that's the underlying dynamics of how people and their personalities change and how they get into situations. So what are the actual reasons or situations or pressures? So we're talking about people change under pressure and under different scenarios and circumstances. What are the scenarios and circumstances that lead to affairs and infidelity?
Right. So both of us, I think we use the same kind of language, that infidelity is a coping mechanism, right? So what does that mean? That means that the person is having either trouble within their relationship and can't reach out to their partner and explain the trouble they're having in the relationship. So they remove themselves and maybe cope with someone else by reaching out to someone else.
And so, sorry to interrupt. And sometimes I just want to add on to that. And sometimes they blame their partner for those, even if they haven't spoken to the partner, or even if they can't articulate it, or maybe they kind of said it in passing. Well, I tried. And so there's varying degrees at which they will say, yes, there was problems in my relationship. And this is why it's tricky. When you look online, you'll see most people have this opinion that, well, it's caused by problems in a relationship. I cheated because my spouse wasn't paying attention to me. Well, that's incomplete information. Was your spouse not doing that because your spouse was an unattentive partner that you tried to reason and communicate with?
That I told and I explained that I needed this and then rejected my suspicion and my want.
Or did you feel like, well, I can't talk to them, or they don't listen to me, so I didn't bother?
So I didn't even tell them.
So I didn't tell them. So sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to add that in quick.
We're talking about the same thing, right? So this person is in pain either because their relationship is hurting, or it could also be independent individual aspects, right? So maybe I'm battling with something from my past. Maybe I'm battling with something at work. Maybe I'm having an identity crisis. Maybe there's just something particular about me. And again, instead of reaching out for help for my partner, I cope by reaching out for someone else.
Yeah, it's often an escape. So what we talk a lot in our first episode and in and out in other episodes about attachment, about the idea that there's these processing styles, these love styles, and you have people who avoid, who kind of go inward, they bottle.
So safe by avoiding.
Yeah, and those are the people who typically they would turn to alcohol, drugs, gambling, workaholism, diving into hobbies, affairs, infidelity, anything escape-based. So if you look at the cases, like if you think of any case that you've ever worked on, almost always there's a stress event preceding this. So it's very common in pregnancy, right after childbirth, especially if you have multiple young children.
Death of a loved one.
Death is a big one. Yeah, death is a big one. Any kind of job losses, moves, money troubles, any big stress events.
Age, turning 50, turning 40.
Yeah, mortality and aging.
Mortality, yeah.
So why do these things lead to infidelity? Why would somebody do that as a result of these things? Well, like we're saying, there's this kind of core style. Everybody has one, and about 80% of the men we see have this avoidant style. So when you hear, oh, men do it more, it's something about men. No, it's attachment based, and that just happens to correspond.
When women are unfaithful too, which happens also, sometimes they're because they've pursued a lot, they've tried a lot to help their relationship, or what they think tried a lot to help their relationship. It hasn't worked. So I check out.
Yeah. But ultimately, most people who commit infidelity are in an avoidant state. They're checking out. Yeah.
They're checking out from the relationship because of the pain, and then they reach for someone else in that pain.
So the two ways that happens, typically women would do more of, they get tired and exhausted of trying and having an unresponsive partner, and so they check out. Some men exist in an emotionally checked out state where they have difficulty connecting, and when they experience stress, they turn to escape. Bang.
Sometimes that escapes.
And sometimes, so to talk about, what about serial cheaters who they're doing this through their whole life and it's a character thing? Again, I wouldn't call it character. I would call it a response.
Coping skill.
That's how they do it. So these are usually very kind of outgoing, flirtatious men in most cases, but it can be women as well. And they tend to be people who they have coped through validation from others. That's a big risk factor, is they love validation and attention from other people, and especially from their gender preference.
Oh, yeah, their gender.
Yeah, so regardless of what it is, they really, when they're feeling low or bad about themselves.
It's when they try to confirm that they're not, this is such a heavy word, but that they're not worthless, that they're not insignificant, that they matter, right? And a way we can do that, and we've done it for ages and centuries, is having someone else tell us that we're attractive and wonderful and special, right? So even though it's really hard to see it, infidelity is we conceptualize it as a coping skill, right? So instead of reaching for that beer, instead of reaching for that counselor, instead of reaching for that loved one, we reach for someone else.
Yeah, and that's the way I would phrase it, is when people say, well, what is about this person? And they're trying to make sense of it. Like, what do they have that I don't? They aren't you. That's about it. Yeah. It's somebody who they are not vulnerable and close with. It is a disposable, safe relationship. In most cases, people don't end up with their affair partner. So like the escape provided by burying yourself in work or by drinking, you can just hide and escape in this other relationship. So you talked about the healing power of that information.
So this is something that's really, whenever I see a client, especially the first session, you'll constantly hear from the one that's the victim of the infidelity. Why would he do this to me? Or why would she do this to us? And why does she have or he have that I don't have, right? So this why is critical, that the person who has been unfaithful answer. You have to give them a reason why this happened.
But ironically, most of the time, the most common answer, I don't know.
Yeah, because it's scary. And I get that, right? If I tell her a why, is she going to hear it, or he or she going to hear it as an excuse?
That happens often, yeah.
If I say a why, will she think that I think that it's okay of what I did or what I didn't, right? So no, a why will not alleviate the pain this person is under.
Sure.
A why will not make your actions okay, but a why will give the person future security. So if I know why this happened, then I can prevent it from happening again. If you do not give them a why, then this can happen again. And that is very, very scary.
Yeah, it's the case of, well, this could strike again at any moment.
Any moment. And why am I going to do all of this work? Why am I going to work so hard? Why am I going to trust you again if this can happen at any moment?
Yeah. How could I possibly feel
There's
safe?
no way. That's scary. I wouldn't do it. Like, that's terrifying. But if we give them a why, and it has to be a legitimate why, it has to be a true why. Why it was hard for you to turn to them? Why did you reach out for another person? What did they give you? What like, if you give them that why, even though it's really hard to do, then you provide them security for the future. And that's very healing.
And we're not saying here, okay, so if your partner's hard to talk to, then that's okay, acceptable to have an affair.
No, this doesn't excuse anything.
No, we're not. We're just explaining again, and this is what Carrie just said, is sometimes people can interpret diving into this and explaining why it happens as justification or being an apologist for infidelity. We're not saying that at all.
And I'll say that 2 or 3 times in a session.
Yeah. It's very important to reinforce that concept.
This is not saying that it's okay. It is not going to take your pain away. It's not like...
Yeah, if you're going into, let's say the partner is hard to talk to, and we go, okay, so what about this is challenging for you? Why do you find your partner hard to speak with? And maybe the man, let's say, in a heterosexual marriage is going, well, because she snaps at me or whatever. And then the woman ends up feeling, oh, great, because I'm a bitch, this is my fault. If I was a better wife.
So not only am I, hurting because you cheated on me, now it's my fault you cheated on me.
Yeah, so we make very clear you may have been difficult to talk to, and that may have stressed your partner, but your partner's reaction to that stress is their decision. You are never responsible for somebody cheating on you.
I think I say this all the time. If I am a wonderful wife, like very attentive, not nagging, very warm, attractive, smart, like you give me like I have all the qualities of a perfect wife, can you guarantee me that my husband will not cheat? So it has nothing, like it has, maybe there's information that can help you preventing it from happening again.
But you can't change yourself to make that happen.
No, this is something about that person's decision, of course.
Yeah, it's got to be on that person's end.
That's his or her responsibility.
So just to touch on that again quickly and throw another thing in there, happy marriages have infidelity all the time. Yeah. Because again, it's not always about the relationship. It can be about the individual, the stuff that's going on in them.
Yeah.
And so this person on the other end is going, what did I do? What do I change? How do I stop this from happening again? It's not...
Maybe it's nothing to do with you.
It could be totally out of your control. And that, again...
That's scary.
It's very scary. And that's why the why is so important.
So important. And it's really healing. Like, I think change can happen once we get that why. Until we get that why, there's nothing. We have to wait.
So let's skip to the aftermath. What are some of the fallouts? I think one of the biggest challenges is the pressure that you feel as a result of what happens to leave or take some kind of, maybe not revenge, but some kind of corrective action.
I don't know if you hear this all the time. I don't want to be nice to him because then he thinks it's okay.
Yeah.
I don't want things to go back to normal because he needs to learn or she needs to learn. Right?
But then the other end of the spectrum, so what do? You're just miserable? And how long are you going to be miserable for? How long do I have to be punished for? Yeah. And so these are questions that are really big, and like the definition of infidelity itself, depends on your relationship.
Yeah.
If you feel like this person is totally irredeemable and you don't ever want to see them again, like that's okay. We're not saying you have to forgive somebody, or because you could understand that it's a coping mechanism and all this stuff. Understanding and having a good grasp on that does not mean it must be forgiven. No. You can understand somebody. You can say, I empathize. I'm so sorry for what you've gone through in your life.
But I'm not okay with this.
But I can't deal with somebody who copes in this way. You're allowed to do that. And that goes into the whole...
and even in the past, right? So maybe this person won't cope like this again, but I am not willing to give this person another shot. Yeah. Because that is too hard for me. That is 100% okay. Yeah, you're allowed to do that. And you're also allowed to stay. So people who say that you have to leave, or you're spineless, or you're a coward, or you have no self-respect, that's all bullshit. That's not true at all. Those are people trying to shame you into doing something that they believe is right. And those are misguided people. When I hear people say that to me, is that my mom or that my sister or that my friend, I'm like, how dare they tell my client that they cannot stay with the one they love? Yeah, I feel defensive for them too. Because... that mom, that sister, that friend isn't in love with this guy or this girl, right? How can they ever make a decision? Like, they don't know them like you know them. They don't. see the potential they have. They're not in love with them. So automatically their advice is coming from a very different place. It's very easy to say, leave someone you're not in love with.
And also some people feel pressured to be, quote unquote, supportive by helping the other person not get clouded by their emotions. They think I have to be the strong, decisive, anti-partner figure because they're compromised by the goggles of love and they think they're doing a really good thing. But if your friend or somebody is going through this, please
give them the freedom to
decide. Don't try
decide.
to push them and bully them into leaving their partner. No. You don't know what it's like for them. You don't know what's best for them. We don't either. In our office, we don't ever tell somebody to stay or leave. If a therapist does, that's a big red flag. Probably go see somebody else. We're working on exploring it.
And see what's best for you.
What is best for you?
And for some of them will be to stay together and they overcome. And I've heard from couples, I'm not glad that this infidelity happened, but I'm really happy from where we are right now.
Sure.
Yeah.
I've heard the analogy from Esther Perel that it's like a terminal diagnosis that is overcome. It can change your perspective. You can be scared. All of a sudden you start living life and then maybe you overcome that illness. Like that's a really terrible experience you wouldn't wish on anybody. But the result is you have this totally new take on life. Couples often after years of stagnation following infidelity, suddenly they're having great and frequent sex. They're connecting and talking.
They're talking about things they've never talked about.
They're being more
open.
Yeah, big time. They're being vulnerable at stuff they would never dare bring up. But now it's like, well, kind of fuck it, right?
This is all we got.
This is the worst that could have happened to our relationship. So we may as well just throw caution to the wind and see what happens. And when you do that, sometimes you get some pretty cool results.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful to see. So I would never say that the person that decides to stay is spineless. I would actually be quite the opposite in my personal opinion. I see them as very brave.
Yeah, I think leaving is easier than staying. Staying, you gotta wrestle with all kinds of crap.
If we could forgive and forget, forgiveness would be so easy, right? If we could forget it, then
this didn't even happen.
Yeah, then forgiveness is easy, but forgiving something that you won't forget.
Yeah, and you'll get triggered all the time. I hear about it often. So couples that do make it through, let's go through some of the common factors. One, honesty, disclosure from the
please at the beginning. No trickle truth.
Trickle truth is the killer. So infidelity, in my experience and opinion, the vast majority of the clients that we have seen, infidelity is not what ends the marriage. It is the person got into the infidelity in the first place because they had difficulty with honesty and forthcomingness. Yeah. And that repeats in therapy where I say many times, please, before we begin this process, be sure you're ready to be honest. We do individual sessions with people.
Just so that they get a space where they can do that.
Just in case the pressure of the partner. Again, like we talked about pressure, here's a great example. The partner sitting beside you on the couch, sometimes you can't say, yeah, it's actually still going on, or yeah, I haven't told them everything. There's too much there. Yeah. But if you're alone with a therapist, you can do that. Is this a dishonest person? Well, they're being honest in one and not the other.
I generally find that they have a hard time because they're trying to protect the relationship, right? So I don't want to tell her, I don't want to tell him because if I say this is the coffin, the nail. Like this is a nail that like seals the coffin. This is it, and I'm terrified because I love them, right?
Yeah, that's a really common thread with people who have honesty issues in general. Is they typically have very high levels of shame and insecurity about hurting or offending others, about judgment, and so they try to construct. Being rejected or being looked at as being inadequate or flawed.
So maybe even start that way. Look, I'm terrified of telling you this, but I want you to know everything.
Yeah. So starting, that's huge. So couples that have trickle truth almost never make it because you start building up, then the rug's out from under you again. How can you, how many times can you be kicked in the teeth, right? Before you decide, I can't handle this.
That anymore.
So that's huge. Number one. Complete and total disclosure and honesty, no matter how scary it is. This is your shot. If you don't do that, chances are really high. Little bits are going to come out and you're going to blow up your marriage.
And it can be something as silly as dates. It can be money spent. I've seen couples, like, you didn't tell me you bought that for her. That's it.
Yeah. You said you didn't lie, and that's a lie.
And that's a lie.
And so I'm done. I'm out.
Yeah.
So complete honesty, deep conversations. Number two is staying away from specific questions like how many times did you have sex? Were they better than me? Do they have this? Do they have that?
And exploratory questions.
Exploratory thematic questions. What did you get from this relationship?
Always geared it to give you information. That can be the filter for the person, right? Is this information going to help my relationship? So if I find out what part of the body they liked of this other person, their legs, their hips, whatever, will that improve my relationship in any way? If the answer is no, don't ask the question.
Yeah, that's a great one. I like that a lot. That's a good little test to ask yourself before you go down a rabbit hole that may not be a good idea.
Right. But if I ask what attracted you to this person, and they say how they took care of themselves physically, that can help my relationship.
Yep. What parts of yourself did you feel like you could access or display that you can't with me? What things could you do or talk about with them that you can't with me, and why?
Yeah.
What did you feel? What was that relationship like compared to our relationship?
Yeah.
So this takes a lot of emotional skill. This is a real hard conversation to have. But if you can do that, then that person can realize, like, holy shit, I didn't need to do this. It wasn't that my partner was incapable of giving me these things. It's
just
that
I didn't ask.
I didn't talk about it. I didn't ask. I didn't think it was possible. I didn't even
Maybe
give
they
it a
didn't even know
chance.
they wanted that until they went on, had an affair, got at this question, and then they thought about it, and then they give the answer, right?
Yeah. So it's a process. So that's number 2. Number 3 is the person who commits the infidelity is being very responsive and reassuring and providing the other party with a lot of security.
Yeah, be very responsive, right? And I think another thing that's really important is that the person that committed the infidelity has to be, and maybe they need counseling for this, to not tap in completely to their shame, right? Because if the person taps into their shame, and I'm just such an awful person, I should never be forgiven, they become the victim. So then this other person that's hurt by the infidelity can't ask you questions.
Yeah, they can't even process what they've gone through.
They can't tell you how hurt they are because you're hurting so much that they'll come and rescue you, right? So it does require that the person that committed the act of infidelity to be strong.
Yeah, and this is a good general piece of advice. If you do something that hurts somebody and them trying to raise the issue with you causes you to be so down on yourself that they have to reassure you, you rob them of the opportunity to heal with you, and then you can't move forward. So that's number 3, is the person who's very responsive and healing. Number 4, the partner who was cheated on is doing the work themselves to give the other person the opportunity. Because if you have somebody and you just beat them constantly, no matter what they do, their inputs don't change your outputs,
then you're killing the
then
relationship.
Why if no matter what I do, the result is going to be the same outcome of you beating the crap out of me emotionally?
Then why? Yeah.
What am I doing here? I mean, I
there's
fucked
nothing
up,
that nothing will help.
leave.
Then there's a sense of helplessness, right?
Yeah.
Like there's no matter what I say, no matter what I do, no matter how many sessions of counseling we have,
reactions are the same.
So then why am I? Yeah.
Number 5, I would say, is more of an abstract. I would say people who conceptualize the first relationship as dead, and then there's a new...
I always use that metaphor. Your relationship to this point died.
Yeah, it did not work. It has ended. And now, do you choose this person again?
To create a new one.
And do you address the things that happened, and do you make changes? Or is that not for you? Too much work, too much effort, whatever. All valid.
That's fine.
Totally fine. We're not concerned here with pushing you one direction or the other. It's about what's best for you.
Yeah.
For some people, it's starting a new relationship, doing things differently.
With someone else.
Do that, with somebody else.
And then and some people, it's with the same person.
So either way. So those are the 5 things I would say. Is there anything you would?
No, I would add that the person has been cheated on. I always use like the example of the wound, right? So like to study what this wound says about you, because we'll have these narratives of maybe they cheated on me because I wasn't attractive. Maybe they cheated on me because I was worthless. Maybe they cheated on me, right? So that has to be checked, right? So be very careful with what you're telling yourself of why this infidelity occurred, right? To really hold tight onto what we explained, that it's a coping mechanism and it has something to do with their decision making and not necessarily to do with you.
Yeah, that's a good one too. Your inner critic. We could probably do a whole
because you're hurting so much. Don't
and
hurt more, right? So you're already in pain because your relationship died because of and then you're blaming yourself for killing it.
Yeah, that's a lot.
It's a lot of
to
pain.
Go through. And then you have the family and the friends, and a lot of people choose not to tell their significant others in their lives because of that. Again, totally valid decision.
Yeah, they want to protect the person from what the family could think of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a tough situation. So, I mean, there's so much. You could literally spend hours and hours and hours on this topic, but that's the most important bits that we've encountered.
Or ask questions, right? We can do another one of these if there's questions that are missing, because we talked a little bit about definitions, and we talked the reasons of why, then we talked about like 5 things to kind of help you through surviving infidelity.
We probably could have done like a 4 or 5 episode series with one on each of those. So
if we're missing anything,
if you
please
do want to add something, if you are you feel like we've missed something, or you have questions, or you feel passionately that we're wrong on something, please
let us know.
To get in touch, let us know. You can do that at ryananswers.com/podcast. There you can view the episode, the video version if you're listening. You can see the show notes with all chapter markers, and we have links to different things. I'm going to throw Esther Perel's talk on there. That's a good one. Anything else that you wanted to add before we wrap up?
No.
Okay.
Just a lot of hope, right? We've done this. We've helped couples survive this. So if you're one of those people that wants to work at it, there's definitely help out there.
Yeah, I would say more than half of couples for sure recover if they come to therapy. So it's not even like it's unlikely to happen.
No.
So that's it, guys. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. If you haven't already, please rate and subscribe. Join our podcast, and you can see our updates. We're here every Thursday. Thanks again for listening.
Bye.